What you're about to hear will shake you to your very core. A story so unbelievable, so twisted, that even seasoned FBI agents stood frozen in disbelief. This isn't just another missing person case. This is a tale that will make you question everything you think you know about loyalty, desperation, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. A golden retriever, trembling with exhaustion, approaches two federal agents outside a quiet suburban coffee shop. But this isn't a friendly encounter. The dog's eyes tell a story of pure terror, of secrets buried so deep that only an animal's instinct could uncover them. What happens next will leave you speechless. Before we dive into this psychological thriller that played out in real life, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because what you're about to discover might make you look at your own neighborhood very differently. Trust me, you'll want to share your thoughts after hearing this. Now let me take you back to that fateful Tuesday morning in Cedar Falls, Iowa, where two FBI agents were about to stumble upon a truth so disturbing that it would haunt them for the rest of their careers. Cedar Falls, Iowa, a picture-perfect American town where white picket fences line tree-shaded streets, and neighbors still wave to each other from their front porches. Population 40,000. Crime rate so low that the local police department's biggest concern was usually underage drinking at the community college. This was the kind of place where people moved to escape the chaos of big cities, where children rode their bikes until streetlights came on, where everyone knew everyone. But beneath this Norman Rockwell facade, something sinister was brewing. Meet Special Agent Sarah Chun, a 15-year veteran of the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. At 42, Sarah had seen things that would make most people lose sleep permanently. She tracked serial killers through 3 states, negotiated with hostage takers, and stared into the abyss of human depravity more times than she cared to count. But Sarah had one weakness that made her both extraordinary and vulnerable. She felt everything. Every victim's pain, every family's anguish. It all settled in her chest like stones. Her partner, Agent Marcus Rivera, was her complete opposite. At 38, Marcus was methodical, analytical, emotionally bulletproof. Where Sarah led with her heart, Marcus followed the evidence. Where she saw the human story, he saw the criminal pattern. Together, they were formidable. Apart, they were incomplete. And then there was Rex, a 3-year-old golden retriever whose world had been shattered 72 hours earlier. Rex wasn't just any dog. He was a therapy animal, trained to detect anxiety attacks, to provide comfort to trauma victims, to be a bridge between human pain and healing. His owner, Dr. Emily Patterson, had rescued him as a puppy from a puppy mill bust, and together they'd saved countless lives. But now Rex was alone, and he was trying to save a life that everyone else had given up on. Dr. Emily Patterson had vanished without a trace on a Sunday evening. Her car was found in the parking lot of Riverside Medical Center, where she worked as a trauma psychologist. Her purse was inside, untouched. Security cameras showed her walking to her car at 8:47 p.m. after a long shift, but she never made it home. Her apartment was undisturbed, her routine unchanged, her life seemingly paused mid-sentence. The local police had followed every lead: estranged ex-husband, solid alibi; troubled patients, all accounted for; random abduction, no evidence. After 48 hours, they called in the FBI, fearing they were dealing with something bigger than a simple missing person case. What they didn't know was that Rex had been searching too. Agent Chin pushed open the glass door of Molly's Diner, the tiny bell above chiming a cheerful note that felt obscene, given the circumstances. The coffee was burnt, the eggs were overcooked, but it was the only place in Cedar Falls that opened at 5 a.m., and she'd been awake since 3. "We're missing something," Sarah muttered, spreading crime scene photos across the sticky tabletop. A woman doesn't just disappear from a hospital parking lot without someone seeing something. Marcus stirred sugar into his coffee with mechanical precision. Security footage shows no signs of struggle. No screaming. Either she knew her abductor, or she's dead in a ditch somewhere and we're wasting time with breakfast. Sarah's voice carried an edge that made the waitress glance over nervously. That's when they heard it. A sound that would later replay in Sarah's nightmares. A low, keening whine that seemed to come from the depths of despair itself. Through the diner's window, they saw him. A golden retriever, his usually lustrous coat matted and dirty, his eyes, God, his eyes, filled with an intelligence that seemed almost human. He was sitting perfectly still on the sidewalk, staring directly at them through the glass. Sarah felt something twist in her chest. She'd always been sensitive to animals, probably why she'd never owned one. Their pain was too much to bear on top of everything else she carried. That's not normal behavior, Marcus observed, ever the analyst. Dogs don't typically maintain eye contact with strangers like that. The animal began to whine again, a sound so filled with urgency that other diners turned to look. He was trying to communicate something, his entire body language screaming desperation. "I'm going outside," Sarah announced, already moving toward the door. "Sarah, we don't have time for..." But she was already gone, the door chiming behind her. The moment Sarah stepped onto the sidewalk, Rex was on his feet. Not jumping, not aggressive, purposeful. He approached her with the careful precision of a professional, his training evident even in his distressed state. "Hey there, boy," Sarah whispered, crouching down to his level. "What's wrong?" Rex didn't want pets or comfort. Instead, he grabbed the hem of Sarah's jacket with his teeth, not biting, not aggressive, but insistent. He pulled, then released, then pulled again, his message clear. "Follow me." Marcus emerged from the diner, his skepticism written across his face. "Sarah, this is not protocol. We don't follow random dogs." "Look at him, Marcus. Really look at him." Sarah's voice was soft but urgent. "This isn't random. He's been trained. Look at his posture, his focus. This is a working dog, and he's working right now." Rex seemed to understand that he was being discussed. He moved to Marcus, repeated the same behavior, gentle but insistent tugging, then backing away, waiting for them to follow. "Even if that's true," Marcus said, though his voice had lost some of its certainty, "we can't just abandon our investigation to follow a dog through town." That's when Rex did something that would change everything. He sat down directly in front of Marcus and lifted his right paw, the universal sign for shake hands that every dog owner recognized. But as Marcus automatically reached out to shake the offered paw, Rex gently placed it on the crime scene photo of Dr. Emily Patterson that had fallen from the table. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's hands were trembling as she picked up the photograph. "Marcus, this is Rex. This is Dr. Patterson's therapy dog, the one mentioned in the missing person report." Marcus's analytical mind was racing. If he's been missing too, then either he escaped during the abduction or he knows where she is. Sarah finished the thought that neither of them wanted to voice. Dogs don't typically abandon their handlers unless something catastrophic happens. Rex was watching them with an intensity that was almost unnerving. When he saw recognition dawn in their eyes, he stood up again, walked 3 steps away from them, then turned back and waited. "We should call this in," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Calling what?" "That we're following a dog based on a hunch." Sarah was already walking toward their black SUV. "By the time we get approval and backup, it might be too late." Marcus hesitated for one more moment, then made a decision that would define the rest of his career. "Fine, but we do this smart. We follow at a distance, we stay armed, and at the first sign of danger, we call for backup." Rex led them through Cedar Falls like a GPS with a heartbeat. Not running, not frantically, with purpose. He would walk ahead for about 50 yards, then stop and turn back to make sure they were following. When they lagged too far behind, he would return and repeat his gentle insistence. "He's taking us away from the town center," Marcus noted, his trained eye tracking their route. "We're heading toward the industrial district." Sarah watched Rex through the windshield, noting how his pace had changed. Where he'd been determined before, now there was something else, fear. His ears were flattened against his head, his tail low. "He's scared, Marcus. Whatever he's leading us to, he's terrified of it." The neighborhoods began to change. Manicured lawns gave way to chain-link fences. Well-maintained houses became rundown warehouses and abandoned lots. This was the part of Cedar Falls that didn't make it into the tourism brochures. "Sarah," Marcus's voice was tight with concern. "We're entering an area with no cell coverage. If something goes wrong..." "Nothing's going to go wrong," Sarah replied, but her hand instinctively moved to her service weapon. "We're just following a dog." But even as she said it, both agents felt the shift in the atmosphere. They were moving from safety into something else entirely. Rex led them deeper into a maze of abandoned industrial buildings. Rusted, corrugated metal, broken windows, weeds growing through cracked concrete. The kind of place where people went to disappear things they didn't want found. The dog's behavior became increasingly agitated. He would start toward one building, then veer away with a visible shudder. His whining became more frequent, more desperate. He's traumatized, Sarah observed. Whatever happened here, he witnessed it. Finally, Rex stopped in front of a seemingly abandoned warehouse. The building was larger than the others, its loading docks sealed with rusted metal sheeting. But it was a smell that hit them first. Not decay, not death, but something sterile and chemical that didn't belong in an abandoned building. Rex wouldn't go any closer. He sat down about 20 yards from the entrance, shaking visibly, and looked back at them with eyes that seemed to plead, "Please help her." The warehouse loomed before them like a sleeping giant. Sarah and Marcus approached with weapons drawn, their training taking over even as their minds struggled to process what they might find inside. Building supposed to be abandoned according to city records, Marcus whispered into his radio, finally getting enough signal to check in with headquarters. But there's definitely something active here. The front entrance was secured with a heavy chain and industrial padlock, but around the back, they found an unmarked door that was slightly ajar. The chemical smell was stronger here, antiseptic mixed with something else, something organic, that made Sarah's stomach turn. "We should wait for backup," Marcus said. But they both knew that if Dr. Patterson was inside, every minute could be her last. Rex had followed them but stayed well back, lying flat against the ground with his head between his paws. Every instinct told him to run, but loyalty kept him there. The interior was a study in contrasts. Half of the space was exactly what you'd expect. Empty, dusty, filled with forgotten machinery and debris. But the other half had been converted into something that defied explanation. Medical equipment. Clean, sterile, expensive medical equipment. "What the hell is this place?" Sarah breathed, her voice barely a whisper. Operating tables. For stands. Monitoring equipment that belonged in a hospital, not an abandoned warehouse. But most disturbing of all were the cells, small clean rooms with reinforced doors and observation windows. Marcus was already photographing everything, his FBI training overriding his shock. This is organized, professional. Someone invested serious money in this setup. That's when they heard it, a voice weak but unmistakably human, calling from somewhere deeper in the building. "Help? Please, someone help me." They found her in the third cell I checked. Dr. Emily Patterson, 34 years old, trauma psychologist, devoted dog owner, and now the victim of something so twisted that it would take months of investigation to fully understand. She was alive, but barely. Sedated, confused, but alive. The relief in her eyes when she saw them was immediately replaced by terror. "No," she whispered, struggling against the restraints. "You don't understand. You have to leave. He'll come back. He always comes back." Sarah was already working on the restraints, while Marcus secured the area. "Dr. Patterson, we're FBI. You're safe now. Can you tell us who did this to you?" But Emily's eyes were focused past them, on something that made her entire body begin to shake. "Rex," she whispered. "Is Rex alive? Please tell me Rex is alive." "He's fine," Sarah assured her. "He's the one who led us to you." The tears that followed weren't relief. They were pure terror. Then he saw, oh God, he saw everything. As they helped Emily from a cell, she began to speak in fragments, her words painting a picture that neither agent was prepared for. He said I was perfect, said my psychological profile made me ideal for the program, said he'd been watching me for months, studying my work with trauma patients. Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. This wasn't a random abduction. This was something planned, methodical. "What program, Dr. Patterson?" Marcus asked gently. "The experiments. He's been using people. Homeless people mostly. People who wouldn't be missed. But he needed someone with my background for the next phase." Sarah felt ice in her veins. "What kind of experiments?" "Psychological conditioning. Breaking and rebuilding human consciousness." He said he was developing new interrogation techniques for government contracts, but I think he was just enjoying it. The warehouse suddenly felt colder, more oppressive. They needed to get Emily out of there. But they also needed to understand what they'd stumbled into. How many others? Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. I don't know. I heard screaming sometimes. Different voices. But they would stop after a while. And I never heard them again. They were halfway to the exit when they heard it. The rumble of vehicles approaching the warehouse. Multiple engines moving fast. Backup? Sarah asked hopefully. But Marcus was already shaking his head. Too soon. And coming from the wrong direction. Rex, who had been waiting anxiously by the door, suddenly went rigid. His hackles raised, a low growl building in his throat. Not the friendly warning of a house pet, but the dangerous sound of a dog pushed beyond his limits. We need to go. Now. Sarah was already moving Emily toward an emergency exit she'd spotted earlier. But Emily had gone rigid in her arms. No, no, no. He's back. He always comes back. He said he'd never let me go. The warehouse door slammed open, and footsteps echoed through the space. But what froze both agents in place wasn't the sound of criminals or kidnappers. It was a voice they recognized. Sarah? Marcus? What the hell are you doing here? Captain James Morrison, Cedar Falls Police Department. The man who had called in the FBI. The man who had been feeding them information about the case. The man they had trusted. Sarah felt the world tilt around her. Jim? How did you? I've been tracking your GPS, Morrison said, walking toward them with his weapon drawn. Imagine my surprise when I saw you'd found my little research facility. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Morrison hadn't called in the FBI to solve a case. He'd called them in to control it, to make sure that if anyone got too close to the truth, he'd know about it first. Morrison smiled, and it was an expression that belonged on something inhuman. 15 years I've been perfecting my techniques. Do you know how easy it is to make homeless people disappear? How simple it is to convince everyone that they just moved on to another city. Marcus was calculating angles, distances, trying to find a way out that didn't end with all of them dead. You're a police captain. Why would you? Why? Morrison laughed, a sound that made Rex whimper. Because I could. Because I'm good at it. Because watching the human mind break and rebuild itself is the most beautiful thing in the world. Emily was trembling so hard she could barely stand. He's not just studying psychological conditioning. He's perfecting it. He thinks he can create the perfect interrogation subject. Someone who will believe whatever reality he creates for them. And dear Emily, here's going to be my masterpiece, Morrison continued. A trained psychologist who I could condition to believe anything I wanted. Imagine the applications for law enforcement, for national security. But Sarah was looking at Rex, and what she saw there made her blood run cold. The dog wasn't just afraid, he was angry. Angrier than any animal she'd ever seen. There's something you don't know, Jim, Sarah said, her voice deadly calm. Rex isn't just a therapy dog. Morrison's smile faltered slightly. What are you talking about? Before Emily adopted him, he was part of a military program. Bomb detection, search and rescue. But also, Sarah paused, watching Morrison's face. Attack training. He was washed out of the program for being too aggressive when his handler was threatened. It was a lie, but Morrison didn't know that. And Rex, as if sensing the shift in the room's dynamics, took a step forward. He's been protecting Emily for 3 years, Sarah continued. And right now he thinks you're the biggest threat she's ever faced. Rex took another step forward, his growl deepening. Morrison's weapon wavered between the humans and the dog. Call him off, Morrison demanded. I can't, Emily whispered. And this time it wasn't a lie. I can't control him when he's like this. He's protecting his pack. What happened next unfolded in slow motion. Morrison, realizing he was outnumbered and facing an unknown threat from the dog, made a critical error. He turned his weapon toward Rex. The moment the gun moved away from the humans, Marcus acted. Years of FBI training kicked in, and he launched himself at Morrison while Sarah pulled Emily behind cover. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Rex yelped and hit the ground, but whether from a bullet or from throwing himself out of the way, no one could tell. Morrison and Marcus went down together, wrestling for control of the weapon. Sarah couldn't get a clear shot without risking hitting her partner. That's when Emily Patterson, trauma psychologist and victim, showed why she'd survived 3 days in hell. Instead of cowering, she grabbed a piece of medical equipment and brought it down on Morrison's head with surgical precision. The fight was over. Morrison survived, though he'd spend the rest of his life in a federal penitentiary. The investigation that followed uncovered 17 victims over 15 years. People who had been disappeared, experimented on, and ultimately disposed of like laboratory rats. Dr. Emily Patterson required months of therapy to overcome her ordeal, but she eventually returned to work. She specialized in helping victims of psychological trauma, drawing on an understanding that no textbook could provide. Rex suffered a minor gunshot wound to his shoulder, but made a full recovery. He became something of a celebrity in law enforcement circles, the dog who saved the day and brought down a serial killer. But for Sarah Chun and Marcus Rivera, the case changed everything. During the investigation, they discovered that Morrison hadn't been working alone. His research had been funded by a series of shell companies connected to private military contractors. The psychological conditioning techniques he'd developed weren't just a product of a twisted mind. They were being tested for potential government use. The case that had started with a missing person had uncovered a network of corruption that reached into the highest levels of law enforcement and military contracting. Sometimes I wonder, Sarah confided to Marcus months later, if we would have ever found her without Rex. If all those other people would have gotten justice. Dogs know things we don't, Marcus replied. They see truth where we see only evidence. Sarah adopted a dog of her own after the case, a rescue pit bull named Justice. She said she needed something to remind her that loyalty and love still existed in a world that could produce monsters like Morrison. Marcus, ever the analyst, began studying animal behavior and cognition. His report started including recommendations for using dogs in investigations, particularly in cases involving psychological manipulation. And Emily? She started a program pairing therapy dogs with trauma victims, believing that sometimes the path to healing ran on 4 legs. The warehouse was demolished 6 months later, but the impact of what happened there rippled outward like stones thrown into still water. New protocols were established for missing person cases. Background checks for law enforcement were enhanced. The use of therapy animals in investigations was formally recognized. But perhaps most importantly, the case reminded everyone involved that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected sources. Sometimes the voice crying out for help doesn't speak with words. Sometimes it barks. Rex and Emily still work together, though they've both changed. She's more cautious, more aware of the darkness that can hide behind familiar faces. He's more protective, more alert to threats. But their bond, tested in the crucible of terror, emerged stronger than ever. Agent Chin kept in touch with Emily and Rex, visiting them every few months. She said it helped her remember why she did the job, not for the statistics or the case clearance rate, but for moments like the one when Emily first saw Rex again after the warehouse, when she dropped to her knees and he ran to her, and they held each other while both of them cried. But this story raises questions that go beyond one case. One criminal, one heroic dog. How many other Morrisons are out there, hiding behind badges and authority? How many victims disappear into systems designed to protect the very people who are preying on them? And perhaps most importantly, how many times do we ignore the signs, dismiss the warnings, overlook the desperate pleas for help simply because they don't come in the form we expect? Rex couldn't speak human words, but his message was clear to anyone willing to listen. Something is wrong. Someone needs help. Follow. How many times do we fail to follow? So I want to know, what do you think? Have you ever had an animal try to communicate something important to you? Have you ever wondered what they're really thinking? What they're trying to tell us? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Do you believe animals have a sixth sense about danger? Do you think Rex truly understood what he was doing? Or was it just instinct? And here's the question that keeps me up at night. How many other cases like this are happening right now, with victims waiting for anyone to listen to the signs? If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you to pay attention to the world around you, then please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Emily's story, Rex's story, the story of how loyalty and love can triumph over the darkest evil. Subscribe for more true crime stories that will challenge everything you think you know about justice, about courage, about the unexpected heroes walking among us every day. And remember, sometimes the most important voices are the ones that don't speak with words. Sometimes salvation has 4 legs and a wet nose. Sometimes the heroes are the ones we least expect. Until next time, keep listening, keep watching, and never underestimate the power of unconditional love. Your comments matter to me. Where are you watching from tonight? What did you think of Rex's incredible journey? Share your thoughts below, and let's keep this conversation going, because every voice matters, even the ones that bark.